Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome back. If you're coming back, if you're not coming back, welcome to my channel. So there is currently a very bad storm on the way to my state right now. So instead of, like doing something like a normal person would do, I decided to record this video talking about all the books that I read in March. So that's what this video is going to be. In the month of March, I ended up reading 8 books, which was, higher than normal, but not as much as I wanted to read. I was planning on reading 12 books, but we'll get into why I did it in a second. So the first book that I read in the month of March was The Meaning of Birds by J.J. Robin Brown. This is a book that carried over from February. I started reading it in February, but I didn't actually finish it, and I think I finished it on like the 1st or 2nd of March. This book is about a girl named Jess who just recently lost her girlfriend, Vivi, to the flu, and the book is basically about Jess trying to figure out how to live her life without Vivi after they've been in a relationship for quite a while at this point. After she got in this relationship with Vivi, she basically became a brand new person. Prior to Vivi, she would get in fights, and she was kind of like a bad kid. And then she got in a relationship with Vivi, and things were going great. Things were going great, things were perfect, and they loved each other, woo, great. And then Vivi ended up dying, obviously. And then Jess kind of falls back into this same sort of she falls back into bad behavior, and she doesn't do very good things. She ends up getting in a lot of fights, and she gets sent to alternative school where she meets a bunch of other people in her life. I actually didn't really end up liking this book as much as I thought I would, because I was reading it, and first and foremost, this book reminded me a lot of another book, which is actually one of my favorite books. It reminded me a lot of this book, History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera, which is one of my favorite books at this point in my life right now, and The Meaning of Birds reminded me of this book a lot. So I, obviously, having read that book and reading another book that's basically kind of sort of the same thing, I just wasn't really all that impressed. I was like, hey, I feel like I've read this before. Another reason that I didn't really like it is there was a scene in the book where, so this is a WOW story, right? So there's a scene in the book where Jess is hanging out with one of her guy friends, and she's kind of drunk, she's kind of high, she's kind of intoxicated, and she ends up kissing this guy. Now, I don't know why this is a thing, especially considering the author of this book is in a relationship with a woman as well. They're married and everything, and someone who is gay, Jess identifies as a lesbian in the entire story, but for some reason people seem to have this idea that, oh, when you're drunk or intoxicated, you'll just do whatever you want with anyone, which isn't true, and I feel like, especially considering the author is gay herself, she would know this, but nope, that's a thing that happened, and I really did not like it. Also, I felt so bad for this friend of hers, because he's such an innocent kid, he's such an innocent character, and I just feel like he didn't deserve what Jess did to him at that point in the story. Other than that, the story was okay. Again, it reminded me a lot of History Is All You Left Me, the way that it was kind of just Jess trying to move on and figure out how to live her life post-Vivi, as she often uses to explain it. And I really liked how it didn't jump immediately into oh, she tried to get in a relationship immediately. No, this definitely hurt her a lot, and she actually tried to go out of her way to not get in a relationship after Vivi. But overall, the story was just kind of lackluster. I didn't like it all that much, which is really sad, because this is a book that I actually found on my own. I didn't get it off a list or anything. I was at the library one day, and I just saw it, on the shelf. I saw the cover, and I was like, is that 2 girls? So I went over, and I grabbed it, and I picked it up, and I read the synopsis, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting, so I checked it out, and, it wasn't the best story, but it was okay. So far, out of the very few WOW stories that I've read, so far I haven't really seemed to find one that I've liked all that much, but hopefully as I read more, I will end up, finding a story that I end up really like. It's gonna happen one day, I promise. The next books that I read this month are actually in a series by C.S. Pacat, The Captive Prince, Prince's Gambit, and King's Rising by C.S. Pacat in the Captive Prince Trilogy. So these 3 books, I actually think the first 2 were posted online, and then they got so popular that the author was able to actually publish the books in real life by the time that the third book was coming out. This is actually a series that was recommended to me by a friend that I talked to online, and she said that she really liked it, and I'm happy that I read it. So this series I actually really enjoyed. I'm just gonna encapsulate what the entire series is about instead of going into like each book, because I read them very fast and one after the other, as you should often do a series, so I kinda can't remember what happened in each book. The entire story is about this character named Demianos of Akylos. I think that's how you pronounce his name, or where he's from, but he is the crown prince of this country called Akylos. But his older brother, who is a bastard prince, meaning that he's an illegitimate child, he is pissed, obviously, that Daemon is going to become the king before he is, even though Castor is the older sibling. So what he does is he throws a little hissy fit, and he decides to capture Daemon and send him away to a neighboring rival country as a pleasure slave for the crown prince in that country named Warrant. The only thing is, Daemon can't reveal his true identity to Warrant or really anyone in Vir, which is this neighboring country, because 5 years prior to the events of this story, there was a war between Vir and Akylos, and Daemon actually killed Warrant's older brother and the actual heir to the throne of Vir, Auguste. Or Auguste, I don't actually know how you pronounce his name. I don't listen to audiobooks, and I don't even think there is an audiobook for this series, but if there is, I didn't listen to it. Sorry if I'm pronouncing things wrong. Daemon knows that if he reveals his true identity to everyone in Vir, that they're just gonna kill him because he killed their prince, right? So Daemon kind of has to go along and like pretend that he was just sent over as his pleasure slave, and he does go by the name Daemon, but nobody actually believes that that's his real name, that they did it as like a joke. It's like, yeah, his name is Daemon, you know, that guy who killed your brother? Yeah, that sort of thing. Again, they're rival countries, they hate each other. I actually really liked this series, which was surprising after I finished this series, and I really liked it. I went online and I was searching around on Goodreads, and I was seeing what other people had to say about the series, and this series seems to have like a absolute, unabashed, like unprecedented hatred, and I can kind of get it after looking into some of the like explanations for why people don't like it, but at the same time I was kind of like, I didn't get the impression that they did. So one of the main reasons people didn't like the series is that it seemed to depict slavery as if it's like a good thing, and that like, oh, slavery is a good thing. Whereas I definitely did not get that impression. In The Captive Prince, which is the first book in the trilogy, which focuses the most on a lot of the like slavery aspects and like the pleasure slaves and all that kind of stuff, and the pets, as they're called in Vir, the scenes are very graphic and they're meant to make the audience uncomfortable. So the fact that so many people were like, oh, it's making slavery seem like a good thing, I really didn't get that impression, because as I was reading these scenes, I was literally sitting there like, oh my god, this is gross, this is awful, like, how can someone be okay with this? It's very much implied that it's not supposed to be like, yes, this is a good thing. Another thing is this book is told from the perspective of Daemon, who, up until becoming a slave himself, he never had any problems with using pleasure slaves or using slaves as this prince in this other country, and it isn't until he became one that he realized how fucked up it is. As Daemon learns, like, how bad it is, that's how it becomes more apparent throughout the story. But even, again, a lot of people write off this entire series because of the graphic depictions in the first book, which I can understand, but, I mean, by the second and third book, it's not as present, and it's definitely shown that Daemon has changed as a character and that he's not okay with it anymore. Overall, I really like this series. I really like the relationship that grew between Daemon and Lauren, and how they just overcame all their obstacles. At the beginning of the story, I hated Lauren, as most people probably do, but of course by the end of the story I was just like, my sweet summer child. I have not read The Summer Palace yet, which is like the story, like one-shot that takes place after the series ends. I haven't read it yet because I've had no way to get my hands on it with the quarantine going on, but after that all ends, I'm gonna go read it, and I'm sure I'm really gonna like it. I've also been looking around on Tumblr and all that kind of stuff, and there's some really good fan art for this series. But overall, really like this series, and I would recommend it. But do be aware of, like, it is very graphic. There's a lot of, like, really bad language and all that kind of stuff. It's very graphic. Just be warned. Okay, so this is books 2, 3, and 4 that I read in the month of March. What did I read next? Hang on. I remember which book I read next. So the next book that I read is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. I just showed you another book by Adam Silvera a little while ago, but this is actually the last book by Adam Silvera that I have read out of all the books that he's published, which is kind of weird considering he's published 5 novels at this point, and this is his first one, and this is the last one that I read out of all 5. But let me just say that as much as I love Adam Silvera, I want him to go back to writing books like this, or like History's All You Left Me, or like They Both Die at the End, because those are my 3 favorite books by him. Infinity Sun was really lackluster. That's a book that came out earlier on this year, and What If It's Us? I don't want to talk about the one. This book is a sci-fi-ish type of book that takes place during, like, present times, I guess, and it's about a boy named Aaron. He lives in this world where there's this company called Lite that can do these procedures that allows people to forget people or points in their past to lead to a more fulfilling future for them, that sort of thing. But this book revolves around this kid named Aaron who has a pretty messed up life. His father committed suicide prior to the events of the story, and he actually attempted suicide. He has a really messed up home life because his brother is like an asshole and his mom works like herself to death. And he has a really messy, complicated group of friends. But he does have a shining light in all this. He has a girlfriend named Genevieve who they've been together for a pretty long time. Then shit goes wrong. So Aaron meets a boy named Thomas, and immediately they hit it off. They become best friends very quickly. Aaron becomes obsessed with him, and Thomas has no problems, like, just showing him around and having fun, and then Aaron messes up in a very bad way. He starts to think that Thomas is gay, and he's just lying to him, and he's not accepting of himself, and then Aaron becomes attracted to Thomas. And this is during a period when Genevieve is away on a trip, so he ends up messing up and he kisses Thomas as a way of saying, like, hey, I like you, I want to be together, sort of thing. And then, of course, Thomas pushes him away, says, hey, I'm not gay, like, I'm not interested in you. And then this is where, like, the story gets really sad because Aaron seems to think, because before this, like, yeah, he had the really messed up stuff with his friends and everything, but he did have a great girlfriend, and he's upset that Thomas doesn't reciprocate his feelings, so he considers getting a Lite procedure to forget the fact that he has discovered that he's gay in a way to try and fix his life. And then, I can't really talk about the book anymore at this point, but just know that the point after that, after he considers doing this procedure, is where this book becomes like, oh, it's so good. It becomes one of my favorites very fast because of the fact that, God, I can't talk about it because of spoilers, but just something happens that makes everything from the past, like what's referenced and talked about earlier on in the book, it just makes everything fall into place, and it's just, oh my God, it destroyed me. I cried by the end of this book because it was amazing. After I finished this book, I immediately wanted to reread it and go back and, like, discover, like, all the stuff that I missed the first time through, but, oh my God, it was so good. I loved it so much, and that's the main reason, one of the reasons why I wish Adam Silvera would go back to writing books like this, with this kind of really sad storyline. I remember I saw this on a flowchart one time that said, like, what kind of book do you want? It said contemporary. How about some Adam Silvera? Like, immediately, and it said, do you want something that's gonna break your heart? And everything that was gonna break your heart was all Adam Silvera, because that's what he does. I wish one day he'll go back to writing books like More Happy Than Not, and books like History's All You Left Me, and books like They Both Die at the End, because, God, those books are so good. But, yeah, I really liked this one. I highly recommend it. And hopefully one day you'll read it too, and you'll understand what I'm talking about when I said that it made me cry and it made me really upset, and that plot twist that literally blew my entire mind open. I sat down to read this in one sitting. I didn't even plan to read it in one sitting. I sat down to read it, and I did not want to put it down. I was hooked immediately. I loved it so much, and I highly recommend it. Moving from a really good book to a really great book, the next book that I read this month was A Lite Too Bright by Samuel Miller. Okay, before I get into why I read this book, I'm going to tell you what it's about. This book is about a boy named Arthur Louis Pullman III who goes on a cross-country train adventure to follow these clues that are left behind by his grandfather, Arthur Louis Pullman I, who was this renowned author who published a book called World Away in the 1970s that became such a cult classic hit. So much to the point where it became one of those books that basically you're forced to read in school, like To Kill a Mockingbird or something. It became that popular. A week before this man died, he disappeared. He just fell off the map. No one really knew where he went. And people assumed that it was in a fit of dementia. He had been suffering from Alzheimer's basically all of his life. And he disappeared a week before he died, and then he showed up in What the Fucksville, also known as Kent, Ohio, and then he died, he passed away. And this book takes place 5 years later. It follows Arthur Louis Pullman III as he tries to follow these clues, as I mentioned, that are left behind in the writings that his grandfather wrote in the week that he died. Arthur follows these clues all across the country, and oh my god, I just remembered, this book is amazing. But so I read this and I absolutely loved it, if you couldn't tell. But also, let me tell you a little bit about this book. So I actually forgot that this book existed. I wasn't planning on reading it at all. It was not on my TBR for the month of March. But I was on Twitter one day and I went to the author, Samuel Miller's, I went to his Twitter page, and I saw that he was going on a book tour for Redemption Prep, which is his second book that's literally supposed to come out in 2 days. I'm so excited. But he's actually coming to my state. I mean, not anymore because it's been canceled and it's probably going to be rescheduled, who knows. But he's actually coming to my state, which never happens. People never come here for book tours. But then I remembered, oh yeah, this lead singer guy of my favorite band, Paradise Fears. Did I not mention that? Sam Miller is the lead singer of Paradise Fears, which is my favorite band, ever. Oh yeah, he published a book in 2018. How did I conveniently forget that he published a book? So I immediately, after I found out, I was like, shit, I have to go to the library and check this book out right now. So I went out and I checked it out, obviously. And now I'm going to, after all this quarantine shit ends, I'm gonna go to a bookstore and I'm gonna buy this book because I loved it so much, and I am so excited for Redemption Prep when it comes out. Oh my god, I'm so excited. Also, Sam, if you're watching this, I don't think you would, because why would you? But if Rosemary, Clyde, and Sage ever comes out, if that ever becomes a real thing, just know for a fact that I'm so gonna fucking read that book. Even though it's supposed to be a shitty book, I feel like you're gonna make it amazing anyway. So this book was amazing. I don't know what else to say. This is in my top 5 now. I was as soon as I finished reading it, and I was like, shit, I'm gonna have to kick something out now. But I love this book so much. I don't know what else to say. Let's just move on, okay? Okay, so after I finished A Lite Too Bright, I obviously had a few other books on my TBR for the month of March, and I planned on reading 12. And, well, these next 2 books are the reason that I didn't reach my goal, because I did not like them. The next book that I read is That's Not What Happened by Cody Keplinger. This is a book about a school shooting. It's about a character named Leanne who was a witness to the school shooting. She was in the bathroom with her best friend Sarah, who ended up dying during this shooting. And this book takes place a few years after the shooting happened, and the tagline is literally, 6 survived to tell the story, but who knows the truth? And obviously the book is called That's Not What Happened, so obviously there was some sort of rumor that started showing that what people believe about this shooting isn't really what happened. But the thing that people believe is that Sarah, who was this girl who was Leanne's best friend who ended up dying, people started believing, because of this big huge rumor that started, that Sarah died clinging on to her faith, that she talked back to this shooter saying that you can kill me but God's gonna accept me into heaven, all that kind of shit. I don't even know what else to say, because I read this book and literally within the first 50 pages, I knew that I wasn't going to like it. I should have just DNF'd it like, most normal people do, but I was hoping it would get better because I had heard good things about it, but I just didn't like it. Once I got to a certain point in the book, page 200 or something, I just skim read until the last chapter because I just did not care what was going on. I didn't like the characters. I thought the story was really basically, the story is about Leanne, who, a few years later, she's so guilty about the fact that she never revealed to everyone that that's not what happened, that Sarah didn't actually die clinging onto her faith. And she goes on this, adventure after finding out that Sarah's parents are publishing a book about Sarah, saying how, yes, she's always been such a good Christian girl, she's always been so amazing, all that kind of shit. Leanne feels super, super guilty that she wants to get the truth out there. And, that's admirable and everything because she's guilty, but, this took place a few years prior to this. If she wanted to say something, she could have said something prior. Also, this book just makes it so hard to like the characters. The two characters I actually like in this book are Denny, because he's funny, and I can't even remember her name. This book makes it so hard to make you like any of these characters, including Leanne, including Miles, especially including Ashley. I fucking hate Ashley in this book. Also, this book just does this thing with religion, as I already mentioned, where it's just... And I don't like when people do this in real life. I guess that's kind of the point of the story, is to show how people will cling on to religion like a vice, and they will not let it go. But I'm not a religious person. I've never really been a religious person, but I just don't like when people do stuff like that. When they say, oh, God has a reason for everything, that's why he did this, and then to, kind of excuse this really shitty, awful fucking thing that happened. No, that's not how it worked. And also, how people who die for their faith become so idolized when it's she's not the only person who died in this shooting, right? I know, if you read the story, you kind of understand that that's the point of the story, to point out how rude and mean everyone kind of becomes because Leanne and Kelly, who's this other character, how they just become so mean to them when they don't believe this story, even though they're the only two fucking people that were in the bathroom with this girl, so they should believe them. But anyways, also, I want to take a second to talk about Kelly, because she's a character who was also a witness to this shooting. As I mentioned, she was also in the bathroom with Sarah and Leanne at the time of this shooting. And very soon after, this rumor started going, Kelly tried to shut it down and said, hey, that's not really what happened, that was my cross necklace. That's the reason it started, because there was a cross necklace that was found in the bathroom, and people were like, oh my god. But Kelly was like, no, that was my necklace, she didn't actually say that, I was the one that said that. And of course, people were like, screw you, trying to take away this girl's story. And then, she got bullied so much to the point where she and her family literally left the town because she was getting bullied so much. But of course, a few years later, Leanne wants to get everyone's perspective about what happened, so she basically stalks this girl, Kelly, to try and get her to write this letter for this book that she wants to put out there to let people know the truth. And of course, Kelly's just like, can you leave me the fuck alone? I don't even know what else to say. I just did not like this story. And it's really sad because this was actually the book out of this next book I'm going to talk about. There was 3 books that I wanted to read about school shootings. Don't ask me why. There was 3 books that I wanted to read, and this was the one that I was looking forward to the most, and it really let me down, sadly. But, if you're interested in reading it, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever read, but I definitely know that I'm probably never going to read it again. So moving on from That's Not What Happened, the next book that I read this month was also one that involved a school shooting, which I somehow ended up liking even less than That's Not What Happened, which is surprising because I did not like that one. It is Violent Ends, a novel in 17 points of view. And the reason it's called that is because this book has 17 different authors. This book, at least one good thing about That's Not What Happened is that they didn't focus on the shooter. They actually don't even mention the shooter's name. They block it out every time it is mentioned. This book is literally about the shooter. And it tries to make you kind of feel bad for him, for like what he went through to lead him to do this. I hate shit like that. I don't like when stories, or just media in general, talks about these shootings and talks about these awful things that happen, and they focus on the shooter and they don't focus on anything else. This book is literally about this kid, this character who has like this awful life, so he ends up killing like 10 fucking people at his school. My favorite chapter in this book was the chapter that was told from the perspective of the gun that the kid used for the school shooting, because every single chapter is about like a new character, and for some reason the authors of this book seem to think that there's no such thing as a teenager who has a normal life. All of them either have a fucked up life and they're bullied, or they have a fucked up life and they bully other people. Every single character. And I'm sitting here like, listen bro, I'm a teenager. I mean, I'm not in high school anymore, but I'm still a teenager. And when I was in high school, I wasn't bullied. I didn't bully people. And I don't have a fucked up life. I mean, I guess you could say I'm pretty lucky to have that, but it's not that uncommon. Every single character, they just have something wrong, that something about their life is fucked up, and normally it's not even just like one thing. It's like, oh, this person comes from a really abusive family, or this person was sexually assaulted, or this person, like, there's just so much where I'm like, okay, so my favorite chapter was the one from the perspective of the gun, so at least I didn't have to read about angsty fucking teenagers anymore. This is the last book that I read this month, and I really did not like it, which is sad because Sean David Hutchinson is one of the authors in this book, and I like Sean David Hutchinson. I've read one of his books, We Are the Ants, and it's not one of my favorites, but it was a pretty good book, and that's why I picked up this book, because Sean David Hutchinson was part of it, and obviously I didn't like it. But anyways, that's the last book that I read this month. I did not reach my reading goal of 12. I only read 8, which again is higher than what I normally read, but I'm definitely going to have to lower my Goodreads goal. I don't even have a Goodreads. To lower my reading goal for the year, because, like, I originally planned on reading 100 books this year, and so far in the month of April, it's halfway through the month of April and I've only read 1 book. Which is kind of sad. I've only read The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and I have 4 other books sitting on my desk, so it's 4 other ones that I planned on reading last month that I haven't read yet, because I wanted to read those 3, like, books about the school shootings, like, in a row, just so I could, you know, like, read it, like, kind of compare them. And after reading 2 that I really, really did not like, I just don't have the confidence in the next one. I mean, I've heard really good things about it, but I'm also really nervous. I don't know. Overall, I mean, I had a good reading month. I had a better reading month than I had a bad reading month, right? Because I had 5 books that I really liked, and I had 3 books that I didn't like. So, overall, it was a pretty good month. I have a new favorite book now, which is amazing. And a new, like, favorite series now, which is also amazing. But overall, the end of the month was pretty lackluster, and hopefully by the end of this month, or throughout this month, I'll be able to get my groove back and I can actually, you know, start reading books again, because if I come back at the end of April having only read 1 book and I already made a video about it, yeah, that's not going to be very good. But anyways, that's what I read this month. I hope you enjoyed this video. This tornado storm thing is probably, like, super close to my house now. I should probably stop recording, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm actually recording on a camera this time, not my phone, so it shouldn't be super bad. Anyways, I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys!